Well, another Monday is here. I want to talk today a little bit about TPMS, and it'd be really hard to cover everything and anything that was TPS related in a little short video like this, but I'm going to touch on this. This is a modified version of one I had done for my students a long time ago, several years ago anyway, but I've kind of updated it and made it a little better. The TPMS is something that came about after a Firestone tire recall from the late 90s, where some of the low pressure was causing the tires to delaminate and it flipped vehicles over. One of my students lost his dad like that. But running underinflated tires is really a dangerous thing to do, because you keep bending that rubber and flexing those belts. You know, no matter what kind of tire, if you run it low long enough, those low profile tires, if you run those tires low, those things will actually, the sidewalls, like you don't have to drive it all that far if it's a really low profile tire, like on a Chrysler Crossfire. I'm talking about factory tires. This lady pulled in, she said, "Hey, I drove with, my tire's been low I drove all the way from the town up the road, and as soon as we started airing it up, the sidewalls blew out on the tire." You know, she tried to blame that on us. We didn't even have 30 pounds of air in the tire when it blew out. But that's just really a bad idea to run low tires. And a tire can be half flat. In other words, if it can have only half the air pressure it's supposed to have and still look okay. So you got to be really careful to make sure you keep a check on your tires, whether you have TPMS or not. The TREAD Act during the Clinton administration mandated the use of suitable TPMS technology in all light motor vehicles under 10,000 pounds to help alert drivers of underinflation events. Alright, so since 2012, a lot of people don't know this, it's been illegal for an automotive repair facility to knowingly let a vehicle out of there with TPS not functioning if it came in with the TPMS working. And so that's really a dicey thing. We had a tire we had to fix one time on this lady's car at the college, and it wasn't a very old car. And we were very careful after, the students had a tendency now and again to break a TPMS sensor. And so, well, I taught them how to get the tire off there if it's one of the rubber ones, that you can't take out of there, how to do it without breaking it. But every now and then we still break one. This one we didn't break. We did not break her sensor. It was perfect when we, as far as the integrity of the quality, we didn't break it. The point is, and so broke that tire down, fixed the flat, put it back together just like we should without disturbing the TPMS sensor, and that stupid thing wouldn't talk, and it had its light on, and so you could point it the tool at it, and the tool couldn't see it, and we had to have done something that caused that. But so I sent up the road to parts store to get a replacement TPMS sensor. We put it in there and we shot it with the tool. She was in a hurry, needed to go, and she was tapping her foot and all this, waiting. So it would talk to our tool, and it was supposed to be for that vehicle, but her TPMS system on the car didn't like it. And so we wound up, she wouldn't have any more of this. She took the car with her, and we had egg on our faces and all that. If you had given us a little more time, we could have got it straightened out. But anytime you got somebody that's in that big of a hurry, then there's going to be a problem there. Well, sensors only transmit, they don't receive, except technically when you use a TPMS tool. And that's just kind of the way that is. And so when they do receive that from the TPMS system, is in a relearn, and the tool is held next to the tire by the valve stem. It excites the transmitting antenna and tickles the sensor to get a response. This is a kind of a dicey thing. If you do this every day with the tool, with whatever tool you've got, it works better than some other times. Incidentally, I've got a TPMS tool here that, let me see if my focus is going to be messed up on this. I put it in front of my face here. See that TPMS tool? I got that one there that I bought to play with. And it's what you got to do. This is a Maxi TPMS Tire Go 808, and it's fairly pricey. This one here was marketed by Autofix, but it's basically the same one as what you get from Autel. And you basically have to go in there and tell it what vehicle you have. And there's a whole bunch of different choices, the frequency of the sensors and all that kind of thing. But that's what that little tool is for. And also keeping the tool updated is important too. And this tool here has free updates so far anyway. It's an automatic wake-up call. The TPMS sensors have an accelerometer that's activated by movement. In other words, whenever the centrifugal force of the tire starts moving, it wakes it up. Because if they stay awake all the time, the battery wouldn't last very long. So they send these little packets of data to the receiver when the movement happens. Typically, the receiver is going to be the same receiver you're using for keyless entry. Because it has, they says, well, we've already got that thing that can read radio signals. Let's just add the stuff to, let it read the TPMS and send an output to the light on the dash and all that, or to the display. When the accelerometer is active, the sensor transmits info every quarter of a minute, half a minute, or 60 seconds. We don't often think about those numbers, but that's the way that is. And so, all right, so in sleep mode, if it doesn't feel motion, it'll go to sleep 10 to 20 minutes after the car's been parked. And that's if the relearn procedure is attempted with active sensors, the system might hear more than one sensor talking at a time, which can confuse you on some systems. Other TPMS cars shouldn't be nearby. If you got another car that's parked really close because your shop is small and you're shooting the TPS over here, there's a possibility that your unit may pick up a sensor in the other car. And that kind of thing doesn't typically happen because usually you got to be really close to the sensor, but still. Strapped sensors are what my F-150 and my Explorer has. However, and on my pickup truck one time, one of these sensors came off its strap and was rattling around inside the tire. Of course, I had a TPMS light and all that. So I went ahead and on that one I broke the tire down. It was when I was still at college, and replaced it with another sensor just like it. But you can, in the tire shop, will usually just put a regular TPMS sensor with the same frequency that's compatible right there at the valve stem. They don't typically even break the tire all the way down whenever one of these fails like that. Of course, if it's broke loose and it's rattling around in the tire, they need to get it out of there, or it's going to start beating the rubber up on the inside of the tire. Not that that's all that big of a deal necessarily, but I don't like having any loose thing rattling around inside of the tire myself. But the light, some units just have a light. Some that don't have a light don't use the TPMS sensor. I mean, in other words, some that only have a light. Like, for example, whenever Ford Windstars first came out, all it was doing was measuring rolling speed on each tire. Toyota Solaras in 2007 were like that. I didn't exhaustively check all of them, but I know I ran into a Solara in 2007 when I was at college that was like that, or it was a 2007 Solara. And I know the Windstars were made that way. So it seems to me like if there was any way you could do it without having a sensor, you'd be better off. Just let it measure the rolling speed of the tires and infer. Of course, the tires would have to be all the same size, but whenever you got a tire that's low on air, it's actually rolling faster like it's a smaller tire, and that's how those systems work. Some of them got a real sexy display that tell you exactly how much pressure is in each tire. My wife's pickup's like that, The aggravating thing about it is some people that are OCD, if they've got their tires reading 34, 34, 34, and one's reading 32, they're going to want all of them to read exactly the same, and that drives them up the wall. Some vehicles might need to be driven a certain distance so the module can match the sensor IDs and locations. Chrysler had one that in each wheel well, it had something to pick up the sensor on that wheel, except for on the fourth wheel. Because if it knew where the other three were, by default it would know where the fourth one was. That was years ago. Now, in cases where it's tickled by the TPMS tool, it'll talk to the module and it'll say, I'm here, and that must be done in the right sequence. GM is left front, right rear, left rear, so the module will know which sensor's in which tire after rotating the tires. One of the college cars was an Impala that had the tires rotated at a tire shop every time in the town next door down up the road where the main campus was, he would have his oil changed and his tires rotated at a tire shop that was right across from the campus. And every single time they did that, they would mess up. They wouldn't reprogram the TPMS sensor so that this display on the dash would be accurately telling which tire was low and all that kind of thing. This is GM.
Right there by the valve, then you're going to mash it. Alright, now you move to the right front tire, all the way over there. And you see what he's doing here? This is on the Chevy. You're going to mash that one. He needs to be able to see the lights. Feel what your lights are doing. Alright, now move over there. Move to the right rear tire. You have to do them in this order, guys. If you don't do them in this order, it'll foul them up because it's assuming you're doing left front, right rear, left rear. All right, now you're moving to that last one there. And we're going to mash that one. There we go. See, it's telling you it's through. Got it? You understand that? Yay. Bingo. Now you turn it off.
And that's the whole procedure for that one. My Explorer told me I had a bad sensor here, which that was something. And you know, I don't really have a good way to break a tire down here at home since I'm retired, but I took it to the tire shop at the end of the street and they popped me a sensor in there for $100, you know, and that's fair. But it was giving me an error message right here saying tire sensor fault right there, and it was also flashing that tire pressure sensor thing. This one doesn't tell you on my Explorer how much pressure is in each tire. Okay, it just flashes a light. This is my pickup truck. This one, the left front one, according to my TPMS tool, the left front one's the one that's not talking. So anyway, I don't know what, something went wrong with that one, but I got to get one put in that one too. This is Nissan's crazy method of doing it. On that one there, the ones that I've looked at, I don't think that new Nissans, if the new Nissans are like this, Nissan has a tendency to not change things for a long time. You know, like your air conditioner control, they had the same one of those in there for a long, long time in every car just about. But you would set the tire pressures like they show you right here, and it would know if you set the tire pressures at these levels, which one was where. And so once there was a procedure that I never was able to make it work without a scan tool, but there's a wire under the dash that you could ground to tell it you were putting it in learn mode, and then you could drive the thing with the tire pressure set like this, and it would register them, you know, without you even having to have a tool. On this one here, though, you got a scan tool that is capable to do this. You go to tell it you're wanting to register them under your BCM and then set the tire pressures like this. I thought this was an interesting way Nissan had. Nissan does stuff in an interesting way anyway. All the car makers have their little quirks, you know. Alright, you don't bust a sensor. If it's got a nut, take the nut off and let the sensor fall into the tire. That's the way we always like to do it. If it's one of those with a rubber stem, you're going to have to deal with it, you know, a different way, because you can't take that one off before you, because this thing, you know, I'll show you something else about that one in a minute, but I actually drew these pictures. If the tire pressure monitor, you put that at the 12 o'clock position looking straight down on it with your tire machine. They call this the duck head thing right here. And so right behind it, see, you're going to put it right behind it there, and whenever you take the tire off, that way you're not going to hurt the sensor. And when you're putting it back on, make sure it's in front of the duck head so you don't hurt the sensor. That's pretty much a rule of thumb. There's actually videos of people online showing you how to do this with a video. You know, and I didn't use a video. I just made these little illustrations. So most sensors are calibrated in a cold tire pressure for a particular vehicle, but the procedures are vehicle specific, you know. So ambient temperature, this is a little bit of trivia here. Everybody pretty much knows this. Anybody that's got TPMS has seen their light come on when the weather was really cold. For each 10 degree of Fahrenheit of ambient temperature, the tire pressures will change about 2%. With winter temperature changes in some parts of the country, that could mean 5 psi. Even here in the deep south, whenever it's been down in the 20s, my lights will come on, even though the pressure is pretty much up where it needs to be whenever the weather's warming up. You drive it, tires heat up, expands, and the light goes off. So that's something that's basically has to be handled too. This was my first graduate, Adam, and later he came back to be my adjunct instructor after he put some time in the field and all that. And Adam was a really good student. He bought this toolbox from there was a woman whose husband had died, and he left this toolbox. He had a gas station, and this toolbox was just absolutely loaded with tools. And at the time when Adam was going to college, he said, I found out about these tools. I said, hey, Adam, you want to buy a box of tools? He said, well, let me go look at them. So he came over with me, and so the woman didn't have any actually idea how much to ask for them. And every one of these drawers was jam-packed full of tools. I mean, they were some specialty tools, really nice tools, everything that you could imagine that you would need as a professional mechanic. And so she says, how much do you think is a fair price for these? And I said, well, for this number of tools and a box that was this decent box like this, I'd say $500. And so she said, okay, will you give me $500? And Adam pulled a wad of money out of his pocket that he had saved working at the grocery store, peeled off $500 bills and gave them to her. And so he's still a really good friend of mine, and we talk fairly regularly. All right, a good investment for a consumer or shop for serving TPMS. Get a good tire pressure gauge, in addition to your TPMS tool. Handle the gauge. If you drop a gauge, if you're just holding it like up here and you drop it from like 3 feet or something like that, it doesn't matter if it's digital or if it's one you put in your pocket. If you drop the doggone thing, it may not be as accurate as you think it is. And that's something you don't often think about, because most of us have dropped stuff so many times we just don't think about it anymore. But it's good to have a digital gauge because it's real easy. They have a gauge that will trap the air that's got a needle. I really like that. My father-in-law had one of those that he pulled out of the glove box and surprised me with one day. Alright, the tire pressure sensors are activated with a 125 kilohertz signal, but the activation frequency varies from vehicle to vehicle. And the sensors transmit information that ranges from 314.9 to 433.92 megahertz. Anything that transmits in that window will cause interference, but this is not very common. So metal can block the signals, and blocking's a form of interference. That's kind of where when you put this tool down there, you need to have it down there really close to it and right there at the tire. Now, if you got one that's strapped onto the rim, it's going to be on the opposite side of the tire from the valve stem usually. All right. Now, if you're not really supposed to reuse the nut or the grommets, but that's not genuinely followed. I broke that rule a bunch of times myself. Rather than having you can get little kits that's got all these grommets and nuts and stuff in them, so you can replace that every time. And reusing the valve stem would be silly anyway, because it's really hard to get that silly thing out of there. Somebody may have a trick that I don't know about, but one way or another. You can tell what you got. If you can bend this valve stem like that with your thumb, you do not have this. If it's really stiff and won't bend, you've got one of these. So I was used to say, well, you can't, you're just looking at it, how would you tell? And that was one of the reasons I came up with this. And I may have read about it in a magazine or something, but that's a good way to find out. When you're tightening the nut, let's say sealing grommets work at a certain torque. If you do any more than that, it can cause the seal to leak. Them little air bubbles coming out around that thing, we had lowered it and put it in the water. You ought to clean the rubber grommet with a rag and a gentle detergent when reinstalling the sensor to keep leaks from particles. In other words, make sure that place where the seal is doesn't have any particles around it of dirt or sand or something. Because the least little thing can cause the tire to go flat overnight, and that's really dreadful situation that nobody likes. So they can typically, some of them report battery life pretty well. Somebody depotted this one so you could see the battery, but you know, there's no use in going in there trying to change the battery, because that's a bunch of nonsense. You just need to go ahead and replace the sensor. The TPMS batteries have a long shelf life. The sensor doesn't wake up until it sees tire pressure, so you're not going to have the battery sitting there trying to go dead when it's laying on the shelf. Alright, so it depends on sample rate, drive cycles, environment. Sensor batteries usually last 70 to 100,000 miles, or 7 to 10 years. You know, let's say that if you change the tires and put different kind of tires in there, and they require different pressure, on some of them you can go in there with a scan tool and correct that. But this right here is basically what you're supposed to go by, and this is what the TPMS system is programmed for. Some people say, I'm tired of looking at that light, can it be disabled? Most of the time people just put a picture of their boyfriend or their girlfriend in front of it. But you really are not supposed to do that. If a shop is not supposed to disable the TPMS system, it's basically illegal to do that. Will a pressure sensor fit my fancy new wheels? Not always. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. Sometimes the motion detectors won't work right. Now, you know, there's all kinds of other problems, but you can give it a try and just see what happens, you know. Some of them, it's displayed after a battery disconnect because it's waiting for updated pressure information. If it doesn't know what the pressure is because it's been wiped out because you disconnect the battery, sometimes you can hook it back up. Some of them you may see dots here. This is usually on the older ones. The newer ones aren't typically too bad to do that. And this is me updating my scan tool. You know, I plugged it in yesterday and took a picture of it while I was updating. And keeping it updating is really important. Of course, on this one here, it's like with any other Autel, you got to register it with Autel, and then whenever you turned it on, plugged it on, say, hey, it needs an update, so you have to plug the power cord into it while it's updating and all that. Now there's direct replacement. Got to let the TPMS know where they are, but that's it. Programmable sensors are blank and have to be programmed. The Malco guy, the Malco that sells soap and stuff, he actually, believe it or not, around here, he carries a little kit that's got a tool and some sensors that are compatible with just about everything. It works really good. Our local tire store uses those. Now, if you got a sensor that's still a little bit active, you may be able to pull that with your scan tool and write it into and clone it into the other sensor if you know how to do that. And universal sensors are programmed to be compatible with a lot of vehicles, but you may have to do a little bit of work to get them to work right. That is all we have for today, and I really appreciate you guys. How do you like my little photo thing here where I photographed that so you could see the bearings in there? I thought that was pretty cool. I used a double exposure camera to do that that I had one time. This has only been 22 minutes and, well, 23 minutes long, and I hope you guys come back to see me next week. Share it. Tell your friends about it. If you got something out of it, let me know. See you later.